Welcome at the PoSoCoMeS monthly online seminar. The seminar is organized by the Post-Socialism Comparative Memory Studies Working Group, part of the Memory Studies Association. And today is our 11th meeting, and a special day because it's the first birthday of our seminars. We launched them 1 year ago on May 3rd, and we usually meet on the first Monday of each month. And as today, our guests today are Claudia-Florentina Dobre and Ionuț Biliuță, and they will discuss Professor Dobre's book, which was published in Romanian last year, Unwilling Witnesses, Women, Former Political Detainees, and the Memory of Communism in Romania. And I will introduce our speakers. Claudia-Florentina Dobre is the director of the Center for Memory and Identity Studies and of MEMOscapes, a Romanian Journal of Memory and Identity Studies. And she's also a researcher at Nicolae Iorga Institute of History in Bucharest. She got her PhD in history from Laval University in Quebec in 2007, with a thesis on women's memory of communist political persecutions in communist Romania. She conducted research on the memory of communism and on museums, on memorials and monuments, deportation, and everyday life in Romania during communism, on knowledge exchange and academic cultures in the Black Sea region in the 20th century. Her most recent publications include the book we are discussing today, and also numerous edited volumes on the topic of women's studies and memory of communism in East Central Europe. And our discussant today is Ionuț Biliuță, who works as a researcher and at Georg Szinkai Institute and is currently a research fellow at the Polish Institute of Advanced Studies in Warsaw. His latest publication is Constructing Fascist Hagiographies, the genealogy of the prison saints movement in contemporary Romania. And now Dr. Biliuță will introduce the book and ask questions to the author, and then the audience will respond. And after that, we will have time. Author will respond, and after that, there will be time for questions from the audience. So now the microphone is yours, Dr. Ionuț Biliuță.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's very nice to be here, and I think it's a very nice occasion to speak about a very interesting and very challenging book. The only major criticism I can bring in the beginning to this book is the fact that it's written in Romanian. It's not written in English. So therefore, it's not accessible to a lot of people. I will design my today's presentation in two major parts. First, because I presume that some of you haven't read the book, I will give you maybe a 10 minutes short account of what are the main arguments of the book, what is the book about. And my second part of my presentation and my job today would be to address the author a number of key questions and to address some suggestions to make this work and this book even better, maybe in the future for a second edition or another biography or another monograph, and to engage maybe in a dialogue about the issues described in this book. In order not to keep you too much, I will try to read some of my thoughts that I presented and I prepared for today. So, the unwilling witnesses, the political prisoners described by Dr. Claudia-Florentina Dobre in her book, stands today as a commonality in the history of the former Soviet-dominated countries of Eastern Europe. The memory of communist repression against political or class adversaries shaped these countries' historical trajectories and determined tectonical changes in reassessing the societal role of the dissidents and their persecutors in the newly established post-communist societies. Thus, the present book enriches the already vast array of primary and secondary sources thriving on the legacy of the opposition to the communist regimes. Based on her doctoral research and the final draft of her dissertation at Laval University in Canada, the Romanian book is a revised and expanded version. It intends to unearth the relevance of the feminine resistance to the communism, and the habitus of the female prisoner in communist Romania. Furthermore, the author provides answers to some relevant questions about the post-communist battles regarding the memory of resistance in the context of the perpetuation of the uncivil society's power in post-1989 Romania. Prefaced by Emeritus Professor Bogumil Yevshievsky from Laval University, the book has a very interesting introduction, 6 well-balanced chapters, both in structure and argument, and an afterword signed by the author. While the introduction provides the reader with an account of the main challenges encountered by the author while pursuing her research, the historiography of the topic, and the primary motivation that drove Dr. Dobre in writing the present volume, the following 3 chapters should be read as the book's theoretical and methodological core. Therefore, the first chapter entitled, I began the quote, Fieldworks, Problems, and Resources, I end the quote, engages with the question of what it meant to be a female political prisoner in communist Romania. Operating from the perspective of oral history, Dr. Dobre chose to analyze the life stories of the former female prisoners through the lens of a relationship that links the narrators with the researcher to explore both the personal but also the collective memory of the female bourgeois political prisoners. Using the biographical method of investigation, the author considered 3 preconditions that set the stage and targeted local fieldwork and interviews with former women inmates, their class appartenance, their level of education, and their personal stories / social backgrounds. Using the data that resulted from the 11 interviews carried by the author between 2003 2005, but also from the interviews with other political detainees, following Pierre Bourdieu's taxonomy, Dr. Dobre intended to establish, I begin the quote, a feminine habitus describing interwar bourgeois women, I end the quote, based on their shared values, gestures, and language used in their life stories. Besides the interviews, there are other sources employed by the author to reconstruct the social and collective memory of the female political prisoners, such as post-communist newspapers and prisoned testimonies penned by women. The second chapter discusses the position of the witness in the Romanian post-communist society. This section describes the failed process of decommunization of public sphere and political life, the persistence of the former communist nomenclatura in prominent positions of power, and the continuous demand coming from the former political prisoners, mass media, and civil society for an all-white process of condemnation of the communist regime after 1989. It would have entailed political illustration and the legal punishment of the representatives of the repressive institutions, such as Securitate officers, party representatives, and so on and so forth. The chapter also provides the reader with a list of the memory vectors, such as the Association of the Former Political Prisoners in Romania, the Civic Academy Foundation and its patronage over the Memorial Museum of the Communist Repression from Sighet, the impact of the Romanian National Television's documentary named Memorialul Durerii, the Memorial of Sorrow, the utter failure of the campaign striving for the complete restoration of former communists, vehemently required by the associations of political prisoners, the neo-communist strategies of manipulating historical truth, but also the presidential condemnation of communism in December 2006 as a criminal regime, helped only in the public denunciation of the crimes of the political establishment rather than the actual executioners. It also fell short to offer the former political prisoners the much needed restitution and satisfaction for the pain suffered behind the communist bars. The third chapter offers a detailed account of national myths. For example, the myth of the national victimization, or the myth of the interwar perceived as a golden age of Romanian history, employed by former prisoners. Also, the post-communist process of typological heroization of the political prisoner, depicted either as the eternal Romanian peasants or as the national savior. The cultural and religious traits, for example, the Orthodox Church's public appeal for national reconciliation and the prevalent trend towards historical amnesia and collective clemency in Romanian society, of the Romanian public in general, that encourage the apparition of an overarching culture of indifference and silence, preventing any fruitful attempts of historical memorialization of the trials inflicted upon the political prisoners themselves. The second part of the book constitutes the interpretation, the rationalization of the empirical data collected by the author through interviews carried with women political prisoners. Chapter 4, entitled Life Stories in a Feminine Key, Topics and Substance, identifies some common ground between the women recounting their lives and experiences before, during, and after imprisonment. Dr. Dobre established that these women had in common a perception of the interwar years as a golden age, and their childhood and family life as careless and happy period of their lives, despite the trials Romania faced during Second World War. Moving up, some of these women disregarded the imprisonment of their relatives and, according to their anti-communist views and their rebellious adolescence, expected the Western powers to curtail Soviet-backed takeover of power by the representatives of the Communist Party in mid-1940s. No wonder they acted against the communist regime. Following the data provided in the interviews, the author also paints a credible account of the female prisoners' lost time, starting with their unexpected arrest, the brutal interrogation by the Securitate, the sham trial, their prison experiences at Jilava and Mislea prisons, among others, the subsequent strategies of survival behind bars, and finally, their liberation from prison in mid-1960s. Chapter 5, entitled The Ethical Realm of Testimonies, A Feminine Perspective, approaches the feminine survivors as witnesses of history, as conscious subjects who saw history unfolding at a personal level. It also offers a detailed account of the forms of testimony these women embraced through memorialization narratives, preferably by the three main categories of women witnesses: those who have emigrated abroad after their liberation from prisons, the Legionaries / the Romanian fascists, and the women who took an active role in the armed resistance. Despite the numerous challenges, for example, the inability to convey their experiences, shame and fear, the communist practices impending upon their habitus encountered by survivors, the purpose of their testimony varied considerably from denouncing communism as the evil, the absolute evil, to, as the women envisaged in their interviews, their role as the transgenerational transmitters of their experiences, their duty as witnesses of the horrors experienced in prisons for those who could not give testimony, but also as those who express the need for remembrance as a cathartic ritual of social healing of their traumas from the past. The last chapter should be read together with the conclusions of the book. After their release from prison, these women evolved from the representatives of the bourgeois class into enemies of the people and had to recast their identity through marriage or professional reconversion to survive the communist surveillance. Nothing changed after 1989, when the political prisoners, and especially the women interviewed by Dr. Dobre, refused any categorization or label that presented them as victims. At the same time, because of the absence of lustration, penal condemnations for their persecutors, or their modesty, they were deprived of their hero status, and their resistance went unacknowledged. Highly interdisciplinary, innovative, and grounding on a French paradigm of historical analysis, the book by Dr. Claudia-Florentina Dobre represents a welcome addition to the literature in communist studies and in the legacy of totalitarian regimes in Eastern Europe in general, and in Romania in particular. It would also be helpful for Romanian studies and inspiring reading instrument for undergraduate and graduate students in history, political science, and sociology. So with this, I finished the first part of my presentation. So now, with your permission, I would like to move forward and to address some questions to the author, or questions that are also my own reflections on the topic presented to you all, but also some that carry a kind of criticism of the main arguments of the book. And I think the first thing that comes into my mind when I read the book is, I was wondering why the author chose to disregard the importance of the archival collection in shaping her arguments. Although she justified her decision throughout the book not to use the former Securitates files belonging to the women prisoners interviewed according to these women wishes, I guess that it remains an open question where the penal or other kind of files and the documentary films of the former Securitate escaped the grasp of the author. The archival materials would have enabled her to paint a much clearer picture regarding the historical context of the Securitate-led repression against class and political enemies, regardless of gender. The second question that I would like to address Dr. Claudia-Florentina Dobre relates to her decision to overlook partially the political views of the interviewed political prisoners, both during the interviews and following the analysis of the collected data. As archival documents and the recent secondary literature in the field underlines, legionary detainees, for example, tended to have and employed other means of survival and created bonds according to different scenarios than the representatives of the former Liberal or National Peasant Party. And women belonging to various religious denominations behave differently while in prison rather than those women who are more secular. Ideology and political views played a significant role in shaping the imprisoned and their post-imprisoned existence, feminine prisoners included. No wonder that their anti-communist attitudes after 1989 continued those from the interwar and World War II years. The third point that I would like to raise is again a very simple question. And it goes like this: why did the author choose these particular cases and not others? Why these women and not others? Why this list of names? My fourth question would be, how were these subjectivities forged and influenced by the time spent in detention? And how this experience had an impact of their post-communist memorialization of their prison experience? And following up upon this question, and this would be my last point that I will try to raise, I was wondering these days how reliable and trustworthy someone should consider the data provided in the interviews by women in their 70s or even 80s who possessed a shady grasp of what happened 50 years ago. And just to throw a critical reference for this particular aspect, I would like to refer to the introduction signed by Wolf Kahnsteiner, Ned Lebov, and Claudio Fogu for a collective book that appeared in 2006 called The Politics of Memory in Post-War Europe, which was edited with Duke University Press, in which they considered, for example, this kind of oral history approach towards traumatic or agonistic memory, how Wolf Kahnsteiner labeled this kind of prison memories entirely and especially vulnerable. Thank you very much. I will stop here, and I look forward to for the discussion.
Well, thank you, Ionuț, very much for the. Thank you very much for your. Just a second. Okay, for your presentation of my books and for the question. First, let me just say a few words, and then I will ask you to repeat your first question because I couldn't hear it because of my connection, my internet connection. The only thing, the only thing I want to add is the fact that I wonder if the topic is of what is about this topic, because people didn't seem very interested in, but we will try to make it interesting during our discussion. And please repeat the first question. I couldn't hear anything about.
The first question is very simple. Why didn't you use archival collections? I understand perfectly that all your subjects, the subjects for your interviews, asked you not to. But in the same time, you are the researcher. You have to somehow rationalize the argument. So also for the broader picture of your argument in Romania, in communist Romania, but also for somehow envisaging their identities, I think that going for archival documents, and especially the archival of the former Securitate, it could have emboldened, but it would have also enlarged your perspective on both these subjectivities, prison subjectivities, but also their ideological, political views, social background will give you a much, I would say, broader picture of the whole story. So basically that would be my first question. Why didn't you go into the archives? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now I could understand your question, because I was hearing something at the very beginning, but I was not very sure what was about. Well, first of all, let me tell you that this is the topic of my new book, which is to look into their personal files, which are in the Council of the Archives of the National Council of the Archives of the Securitate. Actually, I asked for this. I mean, I'm talking about now, because I said that I'm going to write about in my next book, just looking into the personal files, all files. But although I asked for those files for some time already, I didn't get many of them, only a few of them. Unfortunately, most of the files I got until now that are the files of the trials. You know, not the personal files like you know, the surveillance file or the other one, those of collaboration. But to answer the question related to my book and my PhD thesis. So first of all, it was a methodological choice, because I choose to, let's say, to just focus on their discourse, so on their life stories, and not on for instance, they also gave some other interviews, but I didn't use those interviews either. Because I choose just to use my own archive, which was made especially for this research. Second of all, so they asked me not to look into these files at that moment when I wrote my PhD thesis, because of course the translation of my PhD thesis is quite late. I mean, it was like 14 years later. But I did it first of all because I couldn't do it myself. Actually, I asked someone to do it, but I was not very satisfied with the results, so I've decided not to publish it, that version of my PhD thesis, of the translation. And when I got the time during the pandemic, I've decided to do it myself in order to really make it understandable for the Romanian audience. But at that moment, although I could have access to the files, I decided not to modify the thesis, and I choose to maybe write another book and not to change my original PhD thesis. So it was the methodological approach. Then it was their arguments not to check their files, and anyhow I don't think I would have had access to their files without their permission, if at that time, because they were still alive, and they were not they were not involved in politics or whatever in order to be able to have access to their files without their consent. And so this is about the choice. Of course, as I said, I tried to look now. I got only for the one person the full, all the files, and it's quite interesting. I hope the next book will be even more interesting than this one. Because I have all kind of documents, and anyhow I've decided to use all the documents. I mean, the interviews, other interviews, also some memories and so on, which were published later on. When you ask me about their political views, I was not very much interested in their, in analyzing through this lens, of the political views or political approaches. I chose this methodology of life history, and I gave them the opportunity. I gave them the opportunity to tell their stories from their point of view without interfering. There is some noises I hear. Yes, so. What?
Could you, Emilia Zankina, could you please? Okay, thank you.
There was some noises. Yes. So so it was once again a methodological approach. I've decided to give them the opportunity to tell their stories without asking too much question, without asking about their political views. And I have to say that even two of the women and of men also used to be part of the Legionary movement. They never talk about this. During their life stories, they never talk about this. They didn't tell me. I just found out afterwards, of course, from other people, other political detainees I've met. So they told me, this person and this person used to be member of the Legionary movement, but they never mention it. They never discuss it, and they never, from their life story.
It's enough. It's enough that they acted upon it, because this kind of, I would say, anti-communism, some of your subjects have. It's a direct consequence of the fact that they were members of the legionary movement, and they nurtured, and these women nurtured legionary ideas still in the beginning of 1990s. So giving a place of expression, it should be a very careful process of analysis from the historian, because you don't know who you are dealing with. And that's why I asked the question about the archives, because in the archives, in the files used, if you have used the files, you have known that these people have a certain background, a certain ideological heritage, that they come with a certain baggage from the interwar. So their activism against communism in the 1990s is not just you know, an attempt for their suffering to be acknowledged, but rather it's also a form of political activism. This is what I'm getting to. Thank you.
Yes, but they were during the interwar period, during the first communist years, they were the members of the legionary movement, but they were not involved in any kind of politics after 1990s. So they were not, in a way, I think, of course, their anti-communism came from this. But I don't think it was so important for my interpretation, because they were not involved in politics anymore, not even in the legionary movement. They decided they don't need any political involvement because of what happened to them during communism. I mean, because all this suffering, they just decided to stay away from any political, let's say, involvement, but also ideological. I mean, they just stopped being involved. Of course, reading their files can lead you to this conclusion much, I mean, easier than just listening to their discourse. And anyhow, what it's also interesting is that I found out about their let's say, involvement in the legionary movement also after I wrote my PhD thesis. I mean, because as you may know, beginning with 2011, I started to work for the Memoria Foundation and Cultural Foundation, and it was at that moment when I found out about their background, when I found out much more about all these people, all these political detainees I used to interview for my thesis. But at that very moment, it didn't look very important for me, their political and not even the religious, let's say, point of view or the approach to their life stories. And of course, I can, yes, you can say that being part of the legionary movement, that's why they were anti-communist, etc. But most of these women I interviewed, they were not at all part of this movement. They had no political views, no political attachment, even before the communist regime. They had actually afterwards, some of them, they decided to get involved afterwards with the Democratic Convention and so on, but before they did, they were not involved in politics. And this leads me to your third question, why I choose these cases. And of course, I return again to the methodological approach, because so I've started with this woman, Michaela Grigore, who used to work to the Memoria magazine. And so I started doing interviews with her, and then I asked her to present me to introduce me to her colleagues of prison, friends who were in prison, not necessarily at the same time, but if she had friends, colleagues, etc., who used to be political detainees. And this is how I constitute my my circle of people who were open to tell me their story and to welcome, because as you can now, of course, I mean, this is a very let's say difficult topic to talk about. It's very sensitive for these people, and which is very funny, and I realized it much later, not even at that moment, is even this woman, Michaela Grigore, who used to know me very well. She didn't trust me at the very beginning, because I just listened recently her I mean the interviews I've done with her. Because I did it in different period of times. And I just realized that the first one, which I recorded in June 2003, she was very, I mean, everything, she gave me very few information. She focused very much on her political persecution, but she didn't tell me about all other aspects of her life, especially after she was released from prison. And afterwards, of course, I got more details about all this, and now I know a lot of stuff about everything, because we at some point we started to work together and so on and so forth. But I just realized that at the very moment they were very, I mean, they were not open to discuss about these topics, and they were very much afraid that their discourse will be used in some, I don't know, political purposes or whatever. But they were not very keen to welcome me and to give this interview. That's why I have to, in a way, to restrain my circle, because it was very difficult to get an appointment with these people and to make them tell you about your story, especially when you ask them to record, to use this for for your thesis, for publication. Of course, sometimes it happened that I had discussion with people without recording, because we just met, and it was much more easy to discuss and to I mean for them to open to discussion, to open to me, when I didn't show any interest in recording or in using this information in any other context or whatever. It was just a discussion, but to participate into a research, and of course, because at the Laval University we were asked to have some agreement signed and so on. We had this kind of agreement, so you know that it was very official in a way, and I really needed to have people who agreed to do this, and to give me this freedom to use their discourse and to interpret. And actually, when I wrote my PhD thesis and I just manifested my desire to have it published, Michaela Grigore asked me to read it first. She didn't. She wanted to be sure that I didn't put anything tricky in my thesis. I mean, from their point of view, I didn't use their discourse for some other purposes, because they wanted actually to transmit some information, some values, a certain discourse about political persecution, about themselves, about their friends, about their families, about their social group, and they didn't want me to to write about things they didn't want to. I mean, for me now, for instance, taking the case of Michaela Grigore, it's I found out from the her personal file that she collaborated in the 80s with the Securitate. And it was, for me, it was a shock because I knew her very well, and we were very close at some point, but she would never discuss about this topic. Just to tell you how sensitive it is and how difficult it is to make these people talk about some aspects of their life they don't want to have it exposed to the public, you know, because they wanted to keep a certain image about themselves, about their life, about their experiences. They created this identity for themselves, like anti-communist fighters, this anti-communist identity, and it was not only for themselves like people, but also for their group, social group, you know, because they belong to a social group, to this interwar intelligentsia, interwar middle class, and they just want to keep this image about themselves. When you talk about how reliable are these testimonies, if we can trust what they are saying, well, at least about the discourse, I mean, all these stories they delivered to me, they are how to say, there are a lot of information which we can find from one discourse to another. I mean, for instance, when they describe their life in prison, I mean, you can find it, I could find it in every other life stories, but also in the memories published by other women, other former political detainees. So all things which are related to political persecution are very much, similar. And from this point of view, yes, and I think even from other point of view, because I found out recently a letter written by Michaela Grigore and in 1990 about the 1989 revolution and her involvement in the December revolution. And it's very interesting because you can find the same words in every other discourse, in every other interviews she gave about this very moment. So although this letter, it was an anonymous letter, she never signed it. It was not intended to be published. So I can see that she has already, so I think her memories these are her memories. I mean, she shared afterwards in her interviews this very first memories and this first discourse about her involvement in the 1989 revolution. So it is not something she invented for me or for others. And it's important because it was, and that's why I'm not thinking of, that she invented those things, because some parts of her discourse, I could check that it's very reliable, while the other parts about political persecution can be, the information can be checked with other women who published their testimonies, also who were in prison at the same time with Madame Grigore. So I think it can be, we can use this these testimonies and can be, I don't think that it should, of course they are, as I said, that this is a sensitive topic and that might be very vulnerable, but not like, you cannot use it or to just abandon all this kind of information. And on the other hand, what I think that it's important to have, for me, for my PhD thesis was very important to see how they depict themselves, what kind of discourse they have about political persecution, because it was for me it was much more interesting to see what they were going to tell at that very moment. I mean, in 2003, 2006, let's say, and not necessary if it is very accurate. I mean, about everything what happened to them, and
if I can interrupt you for a second, and to make two critical points. I think we are not talking about your dissertation. We are talking about your book, which was published maybe, I don't know, 12 years after your PhD. And second, I don't think we can separate the discourse from the identity of the person. It's not like the discourse is something and the person who is, voicing the discourse is someone else. So basically what I was trying to tell you by asking you about the archives and was the fact that somehow these people did not invent for themselves a different identity, but rather what they served you in the end was this kind of a form of selective memory. They choose what they served you. So basically this raises another question, which is not the problem of truth, because here we are not judge and jury. We don't have to somehow see if these people are telling the truth, but how can you corroborate? How can you rationalize what they say? Do you trust these women? Do you somehow critically analyze what they are saying? It's not just about discourse, it's also about context. So what I had, my impression when I read your book was that this kind of critical context is missing. So you're trying to rationalize on their arguments and what they are telling you to do and what they are telling about their experience, but in the same time you are not you're not giving us a critical lens of what they are saying in the interviews. You are not somehow putting under scope what they are saying. So this is their personalities remain somehow in the background, their political convictions, what they moved them, what they drove them in telling during the interviews what they told you. So it remains in the background. So what you have in the interviews is not so much a discourse about resistance, but rather a fragmented discourse about resistance. Because for these people, because of their legacy, ideological legacy, life experiences, and so on and so forth, they have their own experience which remains somehow obscure. And without the ideological lens, without their political conviction, without their actual ideas, without their collaboration with the Securitate, which I think is huge and should have been in the book, what we have, it's not the entire picture, it's just fragments. There are only scattered fragments from the whole story. Thank you.
I couldn't hear your last words because my screen was freezing.
I will speak more very, very clear and slowly.
No, it's not about being clear. It's about freezing because my screen was freezing. So just stop everything. But let me just add two things. First of all, memory is always selective. Yes, you cannot do anything about this. For every single person on this earth, memory is selective. And it's always, it's always driven by the present. I mean, you cannot do it in any other way. And third of all, of course, when we talk about discourse, about this kind of experiences, it's the point of view they wanted to share. And from the very beginning, I've said that this was my methodological approach. Of course, you are absolutely right, and I've told you that I'm working on this, and this will be my next book because it will complete my PhD research, because I felt it like yes, I should do it as a historian. It's normal as a researcher. You have to really look into all these documents, not only the discourse which was delivered by these women, but on the other hand, you said that yes, I published it, but I wanted to keep it as my PhD thesis, and I wanted to have it in Romanian, and to it would have, because it was also a choice. Do I have to add all this information I got afterwards? And this would be another book, because it won't be my PhD thesis. It will be totally another book.
Well, the PhD thesis, even in according to American standard or British standard, the book which results from a dissertation, it's not the same thing as the dissertation. It's a revised version. So basically everything that you found out, it should have been in the book. You should not write another book. It should have been in this book. But this is my subjective opinion. It's my opinion. You don't have to trust me or do what I say.
I do not agree with you, because otherwise it won't be, because if I will add everything I learned afterwards, everything, all these documents I have, all these documents from archives, it will be completely another book, because my perspective will be totally different. And I wanted to have my my PhD thesis translated into Romanian, because it was, I mean, you know, it was written in French, so nobody, almost nobody is reading now French, and it was about a Romanian topic, and I wanted to make known my previous research, and just to show that, because I have some ideas which you know, I found out in other books published by others afterwards, without you know, they never cited my thesis, although it was online. You couldn't find it very easy on internet, and there were a lot of people who wrote PhD thesis, published book, and never referred to my thesis. That's why I just wanted to have it in Romanian, so nobody will say that they don't know, they cannot read my book, they don't know my book, etc. My choice was not to change it, because it could have been, as I said, another book. I mean, and as I've already mentioned, and I already said, it will be another book. So just stay tuned. Hello.
So there was another question, to come back to the fact what you said about memory, that memory should be somehow actualized into the present. I agree with that, but only partially. If you look about the approaches by Siobhan Katago and Wolf Kahnsteiner, you will see that this problem in historical studies, there is a huge problem with memory. What we actualize in the present, because if they make reference to this kind of studies regarding the brain, the memory as biological, and you will see that you don't memorialize the same in 1990s, and you don't have the same memories, for example, in 2000. But coming back, I have another question, and with this,
I said, that memory, it's always actualized in the present. So when you talk about something in the past, it depends. You will deliver. I mean, your speech will be influenced by the present. I mean, even if it is about all the I don't know, everything, all the experiences, very old, very they are actualized depending on the present context, depending on the question, depending on the person. Of course, there are many of things which many books written about how memory function, especially our personal memory, how it is actualized. I presented some of these approaches in my book, but of course not all of them, because I couldn't summarize everything which was written about. Of course, if it is always from the standpoint of the present, which is everything is actualized. So this is the principle of memory. Of course, if I would have I don't know, asked them in 1990, for instance, they would have delivered me another discourse. And of course, if I would have maybe if it was you and not me, they would deliver you another type of discourse, because this is also very important. Who is asking? What is your personal relationship with this person? If you are able to create this connection between you and the person you are interviewing. So all these components, it's important, of course, are important for their discourse. It's not about, you know, and it's not about lying. It's about hiding the truth, or having some scheme.
Moment. I didn't say lying. I have never pronounced the word lying. I say selective memory. And this is a very conscious process through which, for example, if you are interviewing me, I will tell you only what I want you to learn or to know about me. So this
but everybody is doing the same all the time.
No, it's not the same. What I'm trying to say this is the fact that somehow I can play you. I can make you tell something about myself or my experience that I would like you to convey, but I'm not telling you what really happened for several reasons. Maybe I don't remember, maybe I'm subjective, maybe I did something wrong, maybe. So this is a problem of authenticity in the end. And it's not a problem of truth, because we are not here to establish what it is true and what is not truth. The problem is that somehow you have to, as a historian, but also in the interview and in this kind of biographical method, you need to have the control of the information. So this is now we're getting to the main point of my questions. Actually, how did you control the information? How did you how you are that sure that what they told you during the interviews is the actual of what happened, or at least the closest experience of what happened? Because, you know, experience cannot be, it can be verbalized, but it cannot be transmitted from one another. It can be only transmitted through discourse. So that's the actual problem. So who played who here? That's my problem. That's what I'm trying to ask you, because it seems that you took their discourses, analyzed it, and started to build your reasoning upon what this person said. And as I mentioned in my last question, there is now a trend in the historical memory studies, and I already gave you the title. It's a collective book by Lev Nebov, Wolf Kansteiner, and Claudio Fogu. It is called The Politics of Memory in Post-War Europe. It's published by Duke University Press in 2006. And Wolf Kansteiner has a lot of articles. He wrote also about the Holocaust. There is a book, a very good book, published in 2016 about the ethics of studying the memory of the Holocaust. And he draws the point, which I think is capital for memory studies in general, that we should be very, very careful about using interviews to establishing what a memory of the past is and what is not, because always the person responding to the questions will be tempting to fabricate another reality, something which is not true, also because of age, but also because our brain tends to reinterpret, to rewrite history over and over again. So there is a huge problem. How do you control what you have? How do you analyze the information that you get from interviews? That's why I try to put all this, I would say, insurance bills around you, like archives, memorial studies, recollections in writing, for example, memoirs, diaries, letters, so on and so forth. That's why you should always corroborate. This is my honest opinion. You should always corroborate interviews with other materials just to ensure that you are on the right path, because interviews are highly problematic. Highly problematic. It's not just about you taking the interview, but it's also the response that you get, which is always tainted. There is no truth in an interview.
Of course, but I didn't, as you, I guess, read, I've never talked in these terms, like trying to find the truth or things like that. But on the other hand, you know, that is not new what they were doing this book, because these topics were discussed in memory studies. I mean, they were discussed like already several years ago about, of course, how we use the memories of the past, how people use this, etc. So it's nothing new. And anyhow, Bourdieu already showed that when we tell our story, I mean, in any context, we just build a new story each time. We build our subjectivity, so it's not about this woman or some women, or just about the communist past or things like that. But it's I mean, this can refer to anyone who is telling their life or writing their life. So it's always you build your life, I mean, through discourse. It's not like you are going to deliver, you are going to give an order, even, I mean, to put in order everything what happened to you, trying to give a meaning to everything which happened, which is not necessarily what I mean you have experienced or felt at that very moment. Because when you are going to talk about this, to deliver a speech or a discourse about your life, you are going to give meaning to everything. So things will be, in a way, your memories will be used just to, in order to build your discourse, to give meaning to your life, to your experience, to also to. But on the other hand, I do not agree we were in this position to play each other. You know, like I didn't try to play them; they didn't try to play me. I mean, I didn't start from this point of view, okay, I should not be very careful with everything they were saying, because how can I? And anyhow, if you, I've already told you, and I've also written in the book that all these experiences are similar. I mean, I'm talking about the women I interviewed, but also the other political detainees who published their memoirs. So concerning the political persecution, things are very, very, I mean, well known now. I mean, it's not like we are inventing things. And anyhow, to tell you that, yes, I looked into their, I told you that I received the files from their trials. And what they told me, I found there. It was recorded by the secret service, Romanian secret service. So these are their documents, and what they told me in our, I mean, in the interview, I could find there almost the same words, because I think some aspects of their life remained in the memory as such. I mean, they didn't need to play me or to invent things, because these experiences were so dramatical or even tragical. They remain as such, and they were able to express them afterwards. Of course, as I've already mentioned, there were some other aspects about their life, especially their life after they were released from prison, which anyhow, at that very moment would have been almost impossible for me to verify if it's true, if they are going to tell me some things which are not, I mean, consistent with even with their image about themselves, because some they can invent some, I don't know, identity which is cannot be very reliable. But of course, if you think as a historian who needs to confront documents in order to see the truth, yes, of course, I have to check all the others. All the other documents, and I've already mentioned several times already that I'm doing this. I'm doing currently. I mean, now I'm doing this. I'm very much concerned with these security files. Of course, hopefully I will get all of them at some point. But at that very moment, as I said, it was about discourse. It was about what I wanted to emphasize in my PhD thesis. It's more about the topics of the discourse and how this, I mean, how their discourse was influenced by the 2003-2006 post-communist context. I mean, about what it happened in the public space. Also, I tried to see how they build their discourse, being influenced by this cadre social de la mémoire, and also about historical memory, cultural memory. This is my intention at that very moment. Of course, as I said, from my point of view, to integrate all the other documents, it will be another approach, another perspective, and totally another book, because and I've already started to write it, and I can tell you that it looks totally different, and it is not the same, it is not the same approach and the same perspective, because this was the let's say what an analysis of their discourse, yes, and of their not of their personal memories, because I cannot have access. It was about discourse, their personal discourse about their life experiences. And this was the idea of this PhD thesis and of the book. And of course, if you want a different perspective, as I said, from my point of view, should be another book and not the one. And I couldn't. I mean, I didn't find just to modify everything and presented it as my PhD thesis, because it was not. I mean, this. So I had some. I built some conclusions. Some. I made an analysis which would have been quite differently if I added some other documents, even if this can be very, very interesting, of course. It's of course, and I think I can even adding all these documents, I can bring a very interesting perspective about all this stuff reunited.
How about taking a question? I see that Maria Pacuc has her hand raised. How about taking, let's listen to her as well. We should not monopolize the discussion.
Okay.
Maria Pacuc?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm sorry that I was really put off by by the strong wording of Ionuț Biliuță, I'm sorry to say, because first of all, I have known Claudia's work since it was in the beginnings, when even I participated in some discussions about what is oral history, how do we do these interviews. Professor Bogumil, what was his name, Claudia, sorry, from Laval, came to Bucharest. Yes, came to Bucharest a couple of times. Yes. And we had discussed this. Why are, I think that oral testimony, this group of women that Claudia studies qualify as an interesting subject to study, because they have a shared experience of their experience with the Securitate and so on. Why are these testimonies less valid than a written I don't know, note in the Securitate files in an archives? Why is something that's in an official archives more valid than an oral interview? Thank you.
I think I have to respond to this.
Yes.
There is a very simple, two simple answers to your question. The first is the fact that I don't, and this is a personal statement, I don't privilege and I don't consider useful for my own research oral history. And here, if we've read the basic texts about oral history, and I think there is a very good handbook of oral history edited by Professor Șoban Catago from Tartu University, you will see that, but also in her books, previous books, you will see that she, although she's the main expert on oral history throughout the world, she always raises the question of the reliability. How do we relay on oral history, on interviews? How do we conduct this? Mm-hmm. And there are many angles through which we can conduct oral history, from an anthropological, social point of view, from a historical point of view, and so on and so forth. So therefore, I'm relying on historians who did oral history in Lithuania and communist Lithuania for, I think, 20 years, who are expressing their own reserves about why oral history is unreliable many times regarding the truth, the experiences, memories of things, and so on and so forth. And second, I don't privilege the archive. I think I was misunderstood here. I don't privilege the archive. If I'm to quote an article by Professor Stephen Kotkin from Princeton University, he wrote a very daring piece in 2004 in which he stated that basically with the open of archives throughout Eastern Europe and Soviet Union, we actually didn't learn anything new about communism. That's his statement. It's bold, it's questionable, we can debate it, of course, but this is what he stated. And there is now a trend in historiography that actually started to question validity, truth, silence in the archives. I don't know. So the archive is, we are not positivist historians. We don't divinize the archive. But what I'm trying to tell here is, why don't we think history in a very safe mode, like journalists, for example? You know, a journalist cannot publish something, a piece in a newspaper, without having at least two sources, or even three, for example, the politics of Washington Post. Why don't we, as historians, do the same thing? How can we verify that our own information, our own, I would say, what do we get from oral history, for example, or for I don't know, literary history, is actually more closely and to the truth? But I don't believe in a bigger truth or truths, so on and so forth. Why don't we corroborate the whole data? This is my basic point. I'm not discarding here or not disparaging here oral history. I'm not not privileging archival history. I don't believe in archives either. I don't think that archives or Romanian archives are less than English archives, for example. or an English as depicted through the Romanian Securitate lens should be trusted more than a Romanian woman who went to prison and she did what she did. No, I didn't say that. I misunderstood. What I'm striving here to underline, to highlight, is the fact that we should be more careful about historical data, about how we are interpreting historical data. We should be more careful how we contextualize the whole stories. And also we should be more careful about the approaches, the theoretical approaches that we embrace in analyzing the historical facts. That's it. That's my only point that I'm making. So,
well, let me just say that thanks God we are not journalists, because that's why there are journalists, and we as historians, we are working with representation. We analyze the representation, all kind, oral, written, whatever. And it depends of the approach. Of course, you can choose to have a very journalistic approach and verify with free sources. But also you can analyze one type of sources because you want to, it depends what is your purpose, what is the aim of the goal of your research, what do you want to find out, and then you will analyze some representation, let's say about some topic. In my case, it was just the discourse of a group of former political detainees who used to be part of the same social group, who have the same background, education, and so on, and similar experiences concerning political persecution, and some of them even spent time in prison. I mean, they were colleagues and they were in the same cells in the political prison. And I was very much, as I said, interested in their discourse, not in general about political persecution, about I was not even interested in memory as such, because I was not a psychologist or whatever to be interested in memory and to see if they play me around or not, if they try to invent something or not, because it was not, it was, my interest, it was just in their discourse about political persecution, and what type of identity and discourse about their experience, and what type of identity they are building through their discourse, and how this larger context will influence them. I mean, like 2006 condemnation of communism in Romania, and so on. So it was about a discourse analysis, let's say, even if it was not very deep. Maybe I should have gone deeper with the discourse analysis, but I was not interested in some topic, larger topic about these women to I didn't try to rewrite their life or just to give a picture about their life in general, their life experience. It was about their representation about communism, about their discourse about their life experiences, and so on. And this was my end. I think it is useful to see from this point of view, because at some point, if we focus only on the point of view of the archives, it will the picture of communism and the history of communism, it will be very much how to say, false, because if you read the official documents, and if you will be interested only in these aspects,
maybe you should read, this is a suggestion, maybe you should read Irina Paperno's book from 2014. She wrote a book about a group of women in Soviet Russia, and it's very interesting, and their oniric experience, how they experienced in prison and persecution through their dreams. There's a very interesting chapter in the book about Anna Akhmatova and Nadezhda Mandelstam, how they perceived, how the persecution, both Mandelstam's husband, Osip Mandelstam, was shot during the Great Purge, and Anna Akhmatova's son, I think, but I'm not sure, I don't want to commit any indiscretion, was sent to the Gulag. So how they perceived the whole, I would say, dynamic of the persecution to their dreams. The point I'm trying to make with Irina Paperno's book, and it's not just Irina Paperno, there is a huge literature in Soviet Russia, but also in Poland, also in Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria even, is the fact that we can study the experience of communism and experience of repression in certain cases, in this case, too famous, without the archives. So when you consider me that I'm some kind of archive apologist, I'm not. I'm really not. What I'm trying, but even Paperno, she's using two kinds of approaches. On the one hand, the literary criticism, and for you, it would have been more interesting rather than using Bourdieu to use Michel Foucault, for example, and psychological determinism, which is basically the act of feelings. In their case, I'm not sure if it would fit. It wouldn't, because it's not the brain, you're rightly, as you rightly said. But this is another way to do it without engaging with the archives. I think I'm misinterpreted here because I asked the questions about the archives. I'm only trying to see how to write, and I was wondering why the book was not more complete, more, I would say, more general, more universal in its scope, more broad in its scope. That's it.
Well, I see your point. I understood that it was not about archives, because I've explained from the very beginning why I didn't choose the archive, and I couldn't do it. How can I do it if I cannot? If it was impossible to have all these files at that very moment. It is it is very difficult even now, after all these years, and even all these women are already
no, it's not.
gone.
It's actually not.
What?
Getting the files. It's not really.
Is not what?
It's not hard to get the files. Today.
Oh, it's very hard because they don't give it to me, because they say they are very busy, etc., etc. They are yelling at me. I have really a hard problem with and you are not going to tell me that you know better my experience, because come on, this is not about memory. It's not about anything. It's about my experience.
I didn't say I know better your experience. I'm just saying that you're the first case that I'm listening to this. What it happens, and actually send an open letter to them, was the fact that they don't give you all the files. That's the only thing that happens. That's the only problem. They don't give you all the files for reasons independent from me.
What I can tell you, I was working with several of my colleagues. They also have problems with, especially recently, maybe 10 years ago, it was easy. Well, 3 years ago, I don't know. But these 2 last years are very complicated. And of course, they are also refusing to give some files. And I know for sure, for instance, that some women had a file. I mean, they were surveyed by security, and they found out their files. Of course, they didn't want to show me their files, but there are I know they have the opportunity to see these files. But for instance, the magnificent archives, our archives, they didn't give it to me. I asked for them, and they said they don't have. And of course, I insisted. I wrote again because I know. Of course, I don't know the number of the file, because I didn't have access to the file itself. But if the woman said that she have read her file, and they didn't give it to me. Maybe because you know, they're too busy to look for every single file in the archives. And anyhow, as they gave me the trial files, they believe that it's enough for now. And so I had to insist. So yes, what are you?
From what you're telling us, I feel like I'm privileged.
Maybe you are. Maybe you are.
I've never had to put up with any of this. What you're telling.
So you are a very lucky person. Me, my several other colleagues, not only from Bucharest but from other parts of this country, they do have problems with even people who have, have published a lot and still have problem with the archives, at least recently. But this is not an issue now, because anyhow, at some point I will have all these files, because I will be very I will go after these files for years if it's necessary. I mean, if I want to see it, I will see it finally. It's not the problem now or anytime soon. But of course, we were discussing about methodological and theoretical approach. Of course, yes, for me, it looks much more interesting at that point to look from Pierre Bourdieu perspective. Of course, you can look of this of any sources from very different theoretical approaches, and you can look it as a historian, anthropologist, psychologist, etc., etc. You can apply very different theoretical approaches. I just found at that very moment that it's more, it explains much more their discourse. This Bourdieu's concept explain their discourse, and at that very moment, of course, now maybe I will look. I look to this discourses from a very different angle, and I will. How to say, I will be able to write it from another perspective, but this won't be the same, as I've already I've said several times. It's not, if you adopt another approach, it will be a different book, and I didn't want to publish another book because I just wanted to present my thesis, because I draw some conclusions, some in this in my thesis, and of course now in the book, which are, I think, is better to be acknowledged by the others, that I was the one to draw this conclusion, and this was the idea behind publishing the book. Even it was much later than the PhD thesis, and meanwhile I could have access to archive, to their personal files, to other information. I had plenty of stuff. I can write a book about what is all around doing interview like others. But I think everybody who is doing oral history, oral interviews, can write books about everything which is behind the scene, let's say, because there are a lot of discussion, there are a lot of information you got in time, but there was not the place to put all this in a book which wanted to be the translation of my PhD thesis. Anyhow, I wanted to, there were many other things which changed, even about the context, about, I've got more information about public policies, about actors involved in public policies, because I had some, after a while, we got more information, but I couldn't add all this information which were not present in my thesis, because it was my choice. It was to publish my PhD thesis, to have it translated into Romanian, even if it is a little bit late. But what can I do? As I said, it was rather difficult to find someone to be able to translate it into Romanian properly. So I had to do it myself. And so this was my let's say methodological, theoretical, and whatever the choice to have it published like this. I also, but I do still believe that you can use oral history and just interpret oral interviews, and not necessary to combine all kind of other sources. Of course, as a historian, I understand your perspective, because all historians in Romania will say the same, that of course you should absolutely combine oral
historians,
sources with written and so on.
Historians in Romania would only rely on the archive, and they will believe what the archive tells them. Historians in Romania do not put together many approaches. They will just go to the archive and reproduce the argument in the archive. Most of them, of course, not every historian. There are also good historians, but most historians in Romania, this is what they do. They take document from the archive. They don't know how to, they just reproduce the information from the archive, and that's it. That's their historical input. So this is not describing Romania. If this would have described Romanian historiography, we will be very, very far away. But and another point that I'm trying to make is the fact that historians in Romania are not very comparative. They always believe that what happened in Romania, it's something like an exceptional case. It never happened anywhere in the world. No, it happened in other places as well, even started in other places and was somehow translated into Romania. So these are, I would say, two of the most dangerous diseases that describe Romanian historians today. And also historiographical mimetism. The fact they are not able to go forward than annal school. But if you allow me one last question, and you already responded and already gave a lot of information and anticipated my my next line of inquiry, I would like to ask you, how would you construct your next book and what it will be about? It would be based on the same persons, the same series of interviews, or you have expanded your subjects, or the number of subjects? Have you conducted more interviews? Do you intend to make some kind of a synthesis between oral history, archival history? It will be also on memory history, but something different. And I really want you to tell us more about your book project. And hopefully,
so
only a wish of mine, thank God it won't be in Romanian. I can only hope that it won't be in Romanian. This is a very, I would say, a very concise wish of mine that it won't be in Romanian. Thank you.
Well, actually, my next book, it would be much more like a journalist type of book, because I'm going to put all the sources together. That will be the same person, because actually I'm also a historian, so and I'm trained partially in Romania. So I really feel like I need to go deep into other type of documents and to corroborate, oral history, written sources, and so on. And so the subjects would be the same, because I have all these interviews I've done with them. But now I just, as I said, look into their files from the archives, but also I'm very much interested to see other interviews that they were given in some other occasion, even, afterwards, because at some point there was a bigger interest in this topic, I mean, in the political persecution and so on, and they gave a lot of interviews in mass media. And I'm also very much interested to see these interviews, not only mine. Although, for instance, in the case of Michaela Grigore, because I've already collected all the information, they're very, very similar. I mean, everything she told me about political persecution, you can find it in her memoirs, in other interviews, even in some articles she wrote before giving me, I mean, before I was talking to her, because she also published in early 90s some papers about her political persecution. So I'm going to corroborate all the possible sources on this. I can find, of course, even personal archives. I mean, like photos and some other letters and so on. But I do. I'm still focusing on the same group because it's much more easy for me to gather all the information. And anyhow, I do not think I can offer you, at least not at this point, you know, a broader perspective on this topic to include too much. I mean, many other people's, and I do want to see all the to look of this on that group of people from different perspective and different approaches, and also theoretical, not only. I do give up, I will give up of Bourdieu this time. Just because it will be a different approach, a different perspective. So it's not the same which I adopted for my PhD thesis, which, as I said, it was translated into Romanian a little bit late. It's true, because afterward there were other people who published on this topic. But actually I was the first to write about, and even if I wrote from a certain perspective, a certain theoretical approach or methodology, I just wanted to be acknowledged, like I did it before others. But it will be in Romania, because I'm not able to write in English, for instance. I mean, I cannot write a book in English about this topic. I will write it in Romanian, and who knows, if I'm lucky enough, I can have it translated into English, but it's not sure. I mean, I'm not sure about this, but for sure it will be in Romanian. And I will send it to you, as I did with all my books.
I know, I already have them all. So I can't wait to receive this one as well. Are there any other questions? If there are any other questions, maybe we should stop here, or do you want to say something in the end for, you know, to conclude the whole presentation?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank Anna for inviting me. I would like to thank everyone who is present. Yes, I saw you, Daniel. Also to thank you for presenting the books, for asking me question about it. Of course, we have different understanding about about how to deal with such a topic, but I invite you to do it yourself, also to use your own approach. Well, what can I say? I've already said that this was my choice to have it translated into Romanian without changing very much about it. That I'm going to write on the same topic in the future. I mean, on the same subjects, but from a different angle and different perspective. Also, not only I mean methodological, but also theoretical. And I hope you will find your answers to your question also in that book. Also, I would like to make a plea for memory studies, even if I know there are a lot of discussion around. Of course, it's normal. I mean, if you are a scientist, you have to criticize your field, and you have to ask a question and not to take it for granted anything. So we have to ask ourselves. Of course, I should have done it more. I mean, to ask about myself in my PhD thesis. I know that this was the so let's say, in my opinion, that I should have wrote about myself and the way I constructed my topic in my PhD thesis, but otherwise it was a methodological approach, not to question their memory, or to question their discourse in the sense that they are playing merely around, they are giving me false information, and I didn't want to. And anyhow, it was not so much about checking the information. If you I mean, I'm not talking about you, Ionuț, because you have read the book, but I'm talking for the others, because if you read their stories about the political persecution, about their experience in prison, and if you read some other memoirs about the same topic, you will see they are very, very similar. So I don't think I had to you know, to make a comparison and to try to check if it is correct what is written here, and so on and so forth. So it was, and if they remember well, or if they remember correctly. Anyhow, I did question because even they question their memories themselves. Some of them, of course, they questioned themselves during the interview, because sometimes they told me, I don't know if I remember well, or if it's my experience, but I do remember about this particular event or particular experience. And it was not so much, because maybe can be tricky, but it was not so much about, I mean, their discourse. It was about themselves, but it was not so much about themselves. It was also about their social group, because they were very, very interested in delivering information about the others, about their colleagues, about their friends, about their milieu, let's say, social milieu, because they wanted to transmit some values and some life experiences. And this was the goal of my thesis, because I was very much interested to see what kind of, not only the accurate information, if they will share some very accurate information about political persecution, but my idea was that to see what kind of values they are committed to, even if they didn't mention their political affiliation or their ideological affiliation, because I can understand it. As I said, they were delivered their discourse in 2003, 2006, and they were very, I mean, very concerned about what they're going to tell. As of course, being member of the Legionary movement, it was not a very, how to say, a very good political option, and not something to talk about. And but for me, this aspect was not very important. I mean, it was not important to see if their anti-communism it was influenced by their former political affiliation, or it was very important the very moment in which they deliver their discourse, the main topics, and the values and the identity they were building through this discourse about themselves, but also about their social group. And I think this is all for now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for this lively methodological discussion, and for the presentation of the book, which not most of us couldn't read because we don't read Romanian. I, for example, don't read, so it was very great opportunity for me to learn more about your research. So yeah, thank you very much, and we will meet at our next PoSoCoMeS seminar in June, and we'll discuss museums of communism. So it will be announced also on our webpage. Okay.